The central point that we made in our previous video was that the consumer is maximizing their utility subject to a certain constraint. The constraint the consumer is facing is the feasible set of options that they have to choose certain bundles of goods from. However, what we left out of our analysis so far was the impact of outside forces determining either the consumer preferences or the constraints that they're facing. One of those outside forces is technology. This video will tell you how technological progress affects the optimal consumer behavior that we have discovered in the previous video. The technological progress is inherently a production concept. You use technology to combine inputs for a certain production goal that you have. But notice that producing a certain grade requires a certain number of hours of setting. Conceptually, this is exactly the same as producing a certain quantity of grain. So let's start with a producer who can produce 64 kilos of grain in 12 hours of work and introduce technological progress to his production. Technological progress enables the producer to get more out from his inputs than before. So for each hour of work, the producer will be able to get higher output than before. This is why we have the new production function sitting above the old production function. So before the technological progress kicked in, the producer was able to get 64 kilos of output from his 12 hours of work. Now, with technological progress, he's able to get 74 kilos from his 12 hours working day. There is an alternative we can think about technological progress. Rather than producing more output in the same time, the producer is now able to get the same output with less resources. As he uses time to produce grain, he's able to get the same 64 kilos as before with much less amount of work. So technological progress allows you to work less hard and still gives you the same output as before. The difference between point D and point B illustrate this way to think about technological progress. Okay, now we know what technological progress does to production, but how does it affect our optimal choices? To understand the answer to this question, it is useful to go back to the production function as a feasibility constraint. If we plot the numbers of free time rather than the number of working hours, we'll get a mirror image of the production frontier. So the production function determines what is feasible to us, but the technological progress expands the production function. Then technological progress effectively expands what is feasible to achieve. It expands our feasibility constraint. We are ready to address the central question in this video. How does this expansion affect the consumer's choice? In this case, our consumer is Angela. To answer this question, we need to know not only what is feasible to Angela, but also what does she want? What does she care about? So she cares about free time and grain. So we can plot some indifference curves and lay them over the original feasibility constraint. Her optimal point would be point A. Point A corresponds to 16 hours of free time per day and 55 kilos of grain that she can produce. Note also that just like in any consumer equilibrium, the marginal rate of substitution will be equal to the marginal rate of transformation. So let's introduce technological progress to this framework. With technological progress, point A is no longer optimal. This is because it sits inside the new feasibility constraint. If Angela keeps choosing point A, she would be wasting resources. She would be wasting resources because with 16 hours of free time, she can achieve more than 55 kilos of grain, right? Alternatively, she can have her original 55 hours of grain and she can have much more hours of free time than before. So in a way, technological progress makes production of this grain much cheaper than before. In any case, point A is no longer optimal. But then what's optimal? The new optimal point for Angela is point E. In this new point E, we have that the slope of the feasibility constraint is equal to the slope of the indifference curve. In other words, the marginal rate of transformation is again equal to the marginal rate of substitution for Angela. As a result of technological progress, Angela can achieve both an extra hour of free time and more grain to consume and sell to the marketplace. So she's better off on all fronts, and her improved welfare was made possible because of technological progress. What we've seen now is an example of how outside factors change consumer equilibrium. In this case, it was technological progress. But the world is full of outside factors. So outside factors typical to the models we use to explain consumer behavior. A very important one is the price change and also income. In the following videos, we'll see how changes in incomes and prices will affect consumer equilibrium. So keep watching.